Why did so many people wear wigs in the 1700s? Back then, a good hairline was an important symbol of status and style, but syphilis was rapidly spreading throughout Europe, causing spotted hair loss. Baldness and syphilis was seen as something shameful, but the use of wigs began to spread even further when King Louis XIV of France began losing his hair at the age of 17. Louis was worried that his baldness would hurt his reputation, so he hired 48 wig makers to combat his hair loss. Soon, the nobility around Louis also began wearing wigs to emulate their king, and not long after, the merchant class also adopted the new fashion. "23-year-old James VI of Scotland was set to marry the 14-year-old Anne of Denmark, and James was waiting excitedly for her arrival. But the days went on, and Anne never arrived. Her fleet had sailed into a terrible storm and had been forced into harbor. James became so impatient that he decided to sail out to find Anne himself. After a troublesome journey, he arrived to finally meet his wife for the first time. But somebody had to take the blame for the delays. The rumor was that witches had conjured up the storms to prevent the royal marriage, so James had dozens of men and women executed, accused of witchcraft.
When thinking about the worst years throughout history, you might think of the Black Death in 1349, the Spanish flu in 1920, or even 2020. But you'd be wrong. The worst year on Earth was 536, the year of darkness. For 1.5 years, the sun was covered by a thick fog, making it as dim as the moon. There are multiple theories of how this happened, but the most widely accepted is a volcanic eruption. This volcanic eruption led to something called a volcanic winter. This resulted in the coldest decade in the past 2,300 years. The sun being covered also resulted in the temperatures dropping. This led to mass crop failure, which led to mass starvation. There are multiple chronicles of it across multiple cultures. Due to this and the bubonic plague that would strike just 4 years later, about 50% of the world's population ended up being wiped out.
The Danish king decided to invade Sweden since they were distracted fighting a war in Poland. However, the Swedish king reacted quickly. He abandoned his campaign in Poland and with all haste marched his army to Denmark. Soon, the Swedes had occupied all of Denmark, except for the country's large islands, where the capital Copenhagen lied. But winter was coming, so everybody assumed the war would now be halted until spring. And since Sweden didn't have enough ships to invade the islands, the Danish king felt safe. However, it became one of the coldest winters in living memory, and the sea protecting Denmark's islands now froze over completely. The Swedish army then marched over the ice and suddenly stood in front of Copenhagen. A panicked Danish king quickly sued for peace.
Comparing the homes of different social classes in Victorian England. Lower classes. The poorest people ended up in workhouses. Working class. The person that lived in this house had 8 children and worked on the railways. It has 2 bedrooms. Middle class. The person that lived in this house was a well-paid clerk. Upper class. The person that lived in this house was part of the nobility. He partied with the celebrities of his day, including the future king.
Here are the 3 biggest myths in history, folks. 1. Napoleon was in fact not particularly short. He was 1.7 meters tall, 5 feet 7 inches. Not massive, but pretty much average for the time. It was British propaganda. Fake news. 2. Julius Caesar, as he was being stabbed to death, did not say et tu brute. Shakespeare made that up. He may have said nothing, or he may have said kai su teknon. And you, my child. 3. No Viking helmet has ever been discovered with horns on it. They didn't have horns on their helmets. Wagner's costume designer made up that fashion in the 1870s.